Welcome back to One on One with Mr. U. Of course, I am your host, Mr. U. In studio with us, former FBI special agent turned pastor, Eric Robinson is here. Before we get into his incredible story, if you're watching and listening for the very, very first time, first off, thanks for making us part of your week. We are live on YouTube and Facebook, as well as LinkedIn as well. So we're live on all three platforms right now. And about an hour or so after the show, we'll be on all the listening platforms anywhere from now up to maybe 2 weeks from today. So thanks again for watching, listening, and making us part of your week. We're excited about this conversation. Thanks for making us part of your day. All right, so Eric, good to have you in the house, man. Good to see you, man. How are you?
Thanks so much. I'm doing well.
Fantastic, man. Good to hear that. We had a fantastic off-site conversation, man. So I'm excited about kind of getting into more details here. But before we talk about your very interesting work, man, love to hear more about you, where you're from, childhood stories, if you have any, and what got you from there to where you are right now. And then we get into your work and some more fun stuff. Go ahead.
I grew up in the Toledo, Ohio area and got to return near home where family still is. So that's nice for me. But along the way, I've been to Chicago, lived there a few times, and then Western New York. And my childhood of growing up in church and having that as a regular part of my life is what led me along the way to eventually making a choice after I graduated college. I should get into Christian ministry. And so that path led me down the usual avenue of youth pastor, associate pastor, and then eventually senior pastor of my own church. That's what came out of my childhood, and that's what I did for about a dozen years in my 20s and then into early 30s. I thought I'd be doing that for the next 50 years, but there are different plans in mind.
And ready to hit a transition, because I feel like that story is like you start off there and then you went into something else, but I think there's more to the story, so I want to get into that a little bit. So talk to us about, because when I first met you and I found out about your work and what you were doing, my first thought was, okay, this man's going from FBI into ministry. I'm like, this doesn't sound like a normal transition. So kind of help me out with what the process looks like. I know you recently retired from the FBI, which is after 24 years of service as a special agent, and you worked in white collar work, from what I understood, counterterrorism, crimes against children, which we definitely need more people like you now, and of course, gangs, drugs, and all manner of corruption. But kind of tell us the story of how you got into that level of service, because I think these days, most folks are trying to run the other direction. If you were to offer to them, they wouldn't want to take that path now. But tell us why you decided to do that. Was it something you were trying to solve per se, or was there a reason why?
Yeah, well, the reason that I moved out of ministry from my early years is I found it impossible to separate myself from what other people were going through. So as people in my congregation are coming to me and they're saying, "Hey, I've got this problem. I think my wife's leaving me. My kid might be developing a drug addiction." I'm working with them, and then I'm still carrying that burden. So it came to a point where I spent 2 straight years every single day with a stress-related headache, and I tried every ibuprofen adjacent type of medication and saw all the doctors, and the last doctor said to me, "Maybe don't be stressed." And so I was like, I got to do something else. Yeah. Okay. Good advice, doc. I'll take that into consideration. But I did have to just find a way to not be stressed, and I had to leave ministry, even though I was getting to do church the way that I wanted to. We were successful. We're bringing people in who'd never been to church before. But I just told my wife, I got to find something that doesn't bring me stress. And then who doesn't want to join the FBI? So I did it on a whim. I thought, hey, look, I took a swing and got a wife who's out of my league. So, let's try a career. And at that time, I had applied to the FBI before 9/11, and my background was in working with Muslims. So I think that might have played a role in them saying, "Yeah, we'll take a chance on you and hire you," because now as they're processing, okay, we need people who know how to interact with Muslims. And so I get the job with the FBI, and they've stuck me in a drug squad.
Oh, Okay. Was that the ideal place to be, or was that more like, because it doesn't sound like traffic, where law enforcement normally starts, like traffic cop walking a
Yeah,
beat? You
yeah,
got the drill squad. That's like, it sounds kind of advanced, but is that my
it,
imagination? Or?
it's pretty mechanical in that you work with the local police, you get a guy who gets busted on a street level, you convince him to work his way up, he buys off of somebody else, and we keep flipping. So it was exciting. I mean, for me, I was getting to live a dream of being in the FBI. So those early years where I was still young, we're out late, we're chasing guys through the streets, we're sitting on phone taps one after another. So it was a great way to get introduced to what the FBI was about while I'm still trying to learn this whole process.
I get it, man. I guess for a lot of folks, it might sound really, really exciting. Tell me what, tell me the truth. I
It
mean,
was exciting.
I mean, no, I'm sure it was. I'm just being facetious there, but I think what I really meant to ask was, you know, that can't be all there is to that. And somebody that's watching, listening, who may think, you know what, I want to do that too. You know, the TV shows look real cool on CBS. So it's like, do I really want to do that? I want you to talk to them, even though it may be exciting. Kind of share what it looks like from the vantage point of somebody who's actually in it, not somebody who's watching it on television. What
Well,
besides the excitement, what else did you see that was like, wow? If your son wants to do it, what would you tell your son or your daughter?
so my youngest would enjoy watching Criminal Minds, and before watching it would say to me, "You get 5 complaints about this episode, and then we'll move on," because they're always doing things different than what the FBI actually does. But
Uh,
what we got to do was to have an impact on our community. And if somebody's interested in getting involved in law enforcement, the FBI's great job. I'll always endorse that. And yet it's different than policing because local cops, even state police, like they're out with the people. So they get more garbage thrown at them. They get
mm,
more tough situations, but they also get to be among the people and be able to see a more uh, immediate impact of what they're doing. With the FBI, we're running long-term investigations. I had a financial case that went on over 4 years through
oh my goodness.
for a number of reasons, but during that time, okay, frustrating. Got to get this guy prosecuted, but also I got that case nailed down by the time we get to the end. So, people want to see regular action. Maybe police is what they want to do. If people want to be part of an elite law enforcement agency that doesn't get in the mix all the time, well, FBI is great too. And one way I supplemented that was getting to be on SWAT. Other people get to be on evidence response teams and get to get involved further with their career that way.
I love it. I love it. I got a couple of questions. So in regards to SWAT, well, let me backtrack. I asked my first question first because it might make more sense then. So how does what you actually did with the FBI and with SWAT differ from what we see? Because anytime somebody's a true SME, a subject matter expert, I always try to ask a question like this. I'm like, we get inundated with this kind of stuff, especially on TV, media, and such. What's actually different? What's the different factors in being a part of the FBI and SWAT that differ from what we see normally?
Well, I mean, the process goes on. There's nobody, I don't call up, that quirky office gal who can type something in a computer and solve issues. Like I'm writing an affidavit, that's taken a few days. It's getting reviewed by a prosecutor, and then we're taken to a judge, and then we execute from there. Like I very rarely do you see those, and obviously you got to condense things for TV, but you just don't see those snap actions happening. The
Yeah.
one difference that I did experience is I had an informant once tell me like, "Hey, I'm online." He was working with a lot of Nazi groups. He goes, "I'm online with a kid who said I'm going to attack mosques in my country." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, fine." I mean, people are always saying that. And he goes, "No, man, he's got a preview video, a scouting video. He's posting it. There's a deadline when he's going to attack." And
Mm.
so we went through emergency orders to get subpoenas to identify the people involved to where this was in Ireland that we found out where the kid was, and they showed up minutes before he was on his way out. He had a balaclava ready to carry out an attack. So usually it's not like that until it has to be like that.
I get it, I think. Wow. So you're talking about the exciting part. In your estimation, what do you think is the part that is like, it was one thing that you would use as a model for why you probably should not pick this profession? Do you have one of those?
Yeah. If you're somebody who can't control themselves, if you're somebody who can't have patience, if you're somebody who like loses temper or just gets that hot head, like there to be a good FBI agent, you have to be able to work with people. So we've got databases, we've got technology that's amazing. We have judicial process that people use, and then eventually I got to interact with someone. And so if I've spoken to many people along the way, both police and civilians, who talk about like arresting child offenders. And they say, "Oh, I couldn't do that. I just put a bullet in their head." I'm like, I get that attitude, but we can't have that attitude, because you just have to go in and try to, all right, I'm trying to get a confession out of you now, as opposed to telling them they're disgusting.
Wow. I could go some places, but I'm not going to do that. That's impactful. If I understand right, you were SWAT for about 15 years or so. You mentioned something about teaching people how law enforcement should properly engage with someone.
Yeah.
Can you break down what it looks like, especially in today's climate? Because I don't think people even want to stop and just have this kind of discussion. It's kind of like, oh, you're bad, you're good, and we put people in categories and boxes. What's the proper way to engage from a law enforcement standpoint, and what does that even mean?
Well, so for me, I can be bad cop. Bad cop's fun. Bad cop, lets off the steam. But like, I'm only going to be bad cop if I have to, because I've given you enough opportunities to comply, and now we've got to force a point. But if I come to your house and I tear down your door, and me and 15 buddies point rifles at you, and I put you in handcuffs, and I tell you I'm going to take you to prison, what do I have to do now to show you I'm in charge? I already did. You should know I'm in charge, and I know I've proven myself. So I don't have to start yelling at you. I don't have to start judging you in any way other than the law, which is just a simple laying out of facts. I don't have to tell you how bad you are and how you're horrible to society. And so if I can come to you and show you a bit of humanity in the midst of this, then that's going to calm things and allow us to possibly even work together. So I didn't lie to people. I didn't put them down. And when all of this happens, the kids are crying, your wife's not sure what's happening. And this is the lowest point of your life. So here I am, and I know this is the lowest point of your life. So I'm going to help you through this. And that manner of kind of reaching out and say, hey, look, man, you might not have been through this before, but I've done this 1,000 times. I can lead you through what the process is and how this is going to be and how this is going to get better. This is the lowest point. Here's how it's going to get better. And even the criminals would respond to that, recognizing, okay, here's somebody who's reaching out to me, and here's someone that maybe I can open up to as well.
Yeah, I love that. What's the most shocking experience that you had since being in law enforcement? I'm talking about the one that made you kind of just drop your jaw, like, wow.
Now, you don't want to know. I can get into more detail, but it very simply, it was a search warrant on a child porn distribution case where we discovered a man that it's not even that, man. That's run of the mill, where we discovered that the subject had been purposely clogging public toilets so that he could harvest the material for his own consumption. And that's not the whole story. He would also freeze it and use it to apply to himself through an orifice. That's about as PG-13 as I can make that story. So whenever guys are telling stories, I just sit back and go, go ahead, tell your story. I've got one for you that no one's ever heard. And it's, even though this happened like 15, 18 years ago, like this is still a story that guys who weren't even there still repeat because it's so shocking.
And this alone doesn't make you second guess being in this industry. Are you kidding me? You didn't even have a second thought when you hit it. This is, you're going to see the underbelly of.
Well, that's the kind of thing where if I said, hey man, make something up that you think, is disgusting, you would see, like, you're not even making that up. But doing search warrants and getting into people's houses, it's very voyeuristic, and you get to see, like, there's that's horrible, that's disgusting, but you just see, like, how do people live like this? Like, just here's a room, and that's where all the dogs and cats expel themselves, like, and that's how they live. Like, here's a bedroom of a guy, and there's Mountain Dew cans up to the edge of the bed, and there's clearly rats and stuff in here, but it just makes you question. That's when you go home and you hug the kids and you go, sorry for being hard on you for keeping the house clean.
Yeah. Wow. I knew I would regret asking it, but this is what I do. I ask tough questions, and I'm getting it right now. But I know that when you're probably on other shows, they ask you about the most horrible thing. I'm not asking for that today. I'd love to hear what the funniest thing that ever happened to you during your time in service. If you have more than one story, by all means, we have time for you to share. Please do. Go ahead.
Well, my favorite prank that I ever played was, we had a case in Toledo, Ohio, and the IRS had a great case, and it was on a couple and their father who were living in a duplex with a blue collar guy. Well, this blue collar guy had been saving money for years, and he let it be known to them, and he was their landlord, that he had $2 million. Well, he falls down the stairs and dies. They couldn't prove homicide, but here comes his will. And look at that. He left them all his money. And what had happened was they got an attorney, they cut her in on it. She faked up the will. So it's going to the three of them, they're going to split it up. But then the dad comes in the IRS because he says, hey man, they're cutting me. They're not giving me a fair cut. So I'm going to flip on them. So they have this great case ready to go to trial. And they come to me and they say, hey man, can you do us a favor? Can you be the affiant on a warrant? We'll write it, but we want you to swear it out because we missed picking up the victim's ashes. And so we know they're going to say, hey, we love this guy, but we're going to show them that they put him in a literal Chinese takeout container and stuck him on the mantle. So clearly, they didn't love him. So I write the warrant. We get the warrant. We go in. We get what we needed. And there's that, there's the box of his ashes. But I knew that the prosecutors were going to show up and just check on how things were going because this is a big case. So leading up, I grabbed an Amazon box from home, grab a shovel, go into my fireplace, and I fill it with ashes. And as the prosecutors come up and they're walking up the driveway, I'd cut a corner of the box, put a hole in it. And while they're walking up, I held the box over my head with ashes just pouring down to the driveway. And I go, guys, I found it. And their faces just turned white as they thought, here's a man's remains pouring out on the driveway. That one was fun.
Oh my goodness, you're something else, brother. I'll tell you that. So, you got another funny story, or was that your top one?
Please, part 1 of 5 if you want all my funny stories. So I had a case. I had a case where this was before I worked crimes against children, but I was helping out on the squad, and Pimp was in prison already, but he was reaching out to the victims, to the young prostitutes, trying to convince them not to testify against him. So my buddy who's working the case says, hey, we're going to have all his jail calls forwarded to your phone so you can listen into what he's saying. Long story short, I work up a case on him because he was not only trying to tamper with witnesses, he was selling drugs out of the prison through his mom, who I worked up charges on, his uncle, his buddy who was a runner, and his girlfriend. So like, I'm taking down the whole family, and this is great. And my colleague says, hey, because you made such a great case out of this, you get to pick who you arrest. And I said, easy. I want the girlfriend, Monica. And I've been listening so many calls between the two of them. I knew I had everything ready. So we go down, and I'm setting up to arrest her. But first we stop at this little local police station, little sheriff's office. And I said, hey, I'm going to go arrest this woman. Is there a place where we can bring her back for an interrogation? And, the sergeant there says, man, we know that family. They're in here more than I'm in here. There's no way she's talking to you. And I said, okay, well, we'll see. So we pick her up, no incident, bring her back to the sheriff's station. And I tell Monica, look, I've been listening to your boyfriend's calls this whole time. I want to play you a few clips of his calls and have you respond to them. And I play the first clip, and it's her boyfriend talking to a woman, and the woman says, I love you, baby. And he's like, I love you too so much. And they're going back and forth. And I said, what do you have to say about that, Monica? And she goes, well, that's not me. And I said, oh, okay. And I play another one, different voice. I play another one, different voice, different woman. And I didn't have to read her rights. I didn't have to convince her that, she was involved in drug sales. I just showed her, this is the boyfriend you stuck your neck out for. And here's him talking to all these women. I didn't get to half of them. And she says, what do you want to know? And just told me everything. We're driving home. I'm on the phone with the prosecutor, and she says, give me the phone. And she says, I'll testify on one condition. I'm the first one in the seat.
I'm assuming that went well for you.
It went well. He ended up having, he was cooked, and he finally pleaded guilty.
Yeah. I know that this is something I see on TV, and this makes me sad when I see it. And I'm from New York, so this is probably not the first time I've seen this, where an informant, they do all of this work, they help out, and then they end up getting the shaft. They get a raw deal. You ever seen that and felt bad about it?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I was always try not to do something like that. Like, most of the informants I worked with were good people who were sticking their necks out. They had access to good information. They weren't the guy. I mean, I also worked with the guys that we were pinching and then flipping, and they were criminals just trying to work off time. But most of the informants I worked with, I realized they're doing things for the United States government they didn't have to. They're getting paid, but they weren't getting paid that well. And they were spending their time helping us. And I was always cognizant of, this guy could stop whenever. And so I was trying to take care of them, watch out for them, not put them in dangerous situations, and try to see that they could get paid, at least a decent amount for what they're doing. So many of them were, here's a Muslim who's helping us out, and his attitude is, I don't care what faith they are. If they're looking to do violence, I'm going to stand up for what's right.
Wow. Yeah. So is there a part of you, I mean, I heard, the one adjective you used to describe your time was exciting. Is there a part of you that just feels like, this is just too much? I mean, you're interacting with criminals all the time, so you got to think about it from the human and the spiritual side, which we're going to come back to in a minute. You're dealing with that. You kind of just seeing, like you said, with that story, basically the society's underbelly for the most part. You're seeing all of the stuff that people don't see. It's like, is there a part of that kind of either weighs on you or makes you feel like, I'm glad I'm not in this? Or do you have that kind of feeling about it after being exposed to it so much?
Well, I'll tell you, so for the first 5 years of my FBI experience, I worked Mexican drug cartels in Chicago.
Okay.
So every person we investigated, whether the subjects or guys driving them, people we're hearing on the phone who are helping them, but they're not going to get charged because they're not breaking the law enough. Every Mexican that I was interacting with was engaged in criminal activity or assisting in it. And I had to watch myself to recognize I'm trying to look at this. Not everyone is like this. I can't build that bias that's going to come natural when everything you look at is like that. And so I had a buddy, we would talk about it of just, let's put this out in the open. We need to be careful. And then similarly, when you clock in at 8:00 and you spend your whole day trying to find criminals, you start to think everybody's terrible. And so, that's again, it's discussion to have with people where if you don't reflect upon what's actually going on, then you can find yourself becoming cynical, becoming angry and mean, instead of saying, I'm trying to, look for it's like being surprised that you find birds when you go out bird watching. Like, this is what you're looking for. You're going to see birds. We're looking for criminals. We're going to see criminals. Humanity isn't all like this.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, brother. You've been a part of multiple, I guess I could say, investigations that were award-winning, if you will. Can you share some of that with us?
Absolutely. We had a case, my buddy Jake was working a civil rights case in Chicago that I was part of as well. Jake was the lead agent and I was assisting. And it was on a man named John Burge, who in the 70s and 80s was part of a group that regularly carried out violence upon the subjects that they were arresting. They were almost exclusively Black men, and they were almost exclusively guilty too. But the Chicago police officers under John Burge would suffocate them to a confession, would beat them with phone books. There was even wide reports of them taking a Vietnam era crank telephone, hooking the alligator clips up to their genitals, and then shocking them repeatedly until they would confess. And this went on, and Chicago was fine with it. They fine with the rumors, would investigate because these guys were getting results. The PD did nothing about it. The FBI did nothing about it until years later, Burge was sued civilly in federal court, where he stated, I know nothing about any torture that went on under my command. And so at that point, like Elliot Ness, my buddy Jake opens a case on him to get him for perjury and obstruction of justice for years and years of civil rights violations against Black men. So we worked that case 25 years after the fact. 25 years, we were interviewing people and asking them to remember things from way in the past. And we're also interviewing the victims. The victims were murders, rapists, arsonists. They were terrible people and victims. And I didn't really see a problem in them having gone through some of this. It's just that the police can't do that. Like, you murdered somebody. If you murdered my sister, I'll come torture you too. But you can't do that as the police. Now, you're here to bring about justice. So, they would often try to elicit sympathy. And one man was telling me how he was handcuffed behind his back, and then one of the officers stood on the bumper of the vehicle and just started lifting up. And he said until he felt like his shoulders were going to be torn out. And that's when he confessed to his crime. And he said, because of that, I missed my mother's funeral. And I was curious, like, I wasn't trying to catch him. I just so did they make you confess to something you didn't do? He said, no, I didn't, but I would never have confessed. And okay, I don't feel bad for you going to prison and missing your mom's funeral. I feel bad that the police are doing this. And so we'll try to get them. And so eventually we brought it to a jury, and John Burge was found guilty. And it was a bit of justice. It was just far too late and too delayed. But that case was honored with the Attorney General's Award for, it was literally Jake and the rest of our team did something that was significant in Chicago to at least bring a measure of justice to this situation.
I love that, man. Thanks for sharing that. This is my last question in regards to this. You talked a lot about fighting against corruption, and I would assume that there were times where you would be in some kind of danger yourself in dealing with constant threats and things of that nature. How do you deal with that while you're in the job, while you're on the job, and even after? How do you deal with that? Because there's just so many, you just don't know how long people's memories are.
Well, I mean, you say that, and there's one kid that, after I had arrested him, and he was likely to be a mass shooter, he was prohibited from having firearms because of mental health issues, and that was definitely playing out in things he was posting. I charged him. He spent a year in prison, and then I don't think more than 2 months went by after he got out that I didn't hear from every different law enforcement agency in the area of like, hey man, we're getting reports about this kid. And when I say kid, he's probably 30 now. But everyone saw him as a threat. And because of him, every time I parked my bureau vehicle, the first thing I did was I'd get out and I'd scan the parking lot first and look, because, I'm not afraid, but I'd prefer not to widow my wife and orphan my kids. And he's one who's still out there. So can't worry about it too much, but just have my eyes open.
I understand without understanding.
Yeah.
Thanks for being so transparent and even sharing this, man, because we talked a lot about the human and the spiritual side of this, and I want to get into more of the spiritual side as we close out today. If I can ask you maybe one more question or so, maybe two. So now you're pastor in a Baptist church in Western New York. New York is my hometown, so I know a little bit about it, but Western New York is an area that's a little bit unfamiliar to me. Tell me what that transition was like to move out of the place where you were on the job to pastoring a church full time at that and being the lead pastor in Western New York.
Well, being in Western New York, so this was late 90s to early 2000s, and it's a beautiful area. It's a low income area, but the people were so awesome. And we had formed a church off of another Baptist church, and I took that core group of people and I said to them, we want to set up something that will be non-judgmental. We want to reach people who did not feel comfortable in church. We want them to be able to come and have no judgment so they can hear our message. And I even gave everyone a flinch test. Said, look, all of you came from the Baptist church, but what if somebody isn't dressed like they're going to Baptist church? What if they're wearing a concert t-shirt? What if they got piercings? What if they got tattoos? How are you okay with gay couples? Are you okay with interracial couples? What if there's alcohol in their breath? We need to be able to have a church where when people come, there's nothing on your face that goes, ooh, they should be here, and we want them to hear the message. And so that's what I wanted to build into my congregation. And then we were successful. We were seeing people come into the church who
That's
were
awesome.
open to now listening to the message. So related to this, my favorite parable in the Bible was when Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that's hidden in a field. It has great value. And so a man finds that treasure, sells everything he has so that he can buy the field. And look, we're asking them to sell everything they have, change their lives, latch onto something new. You don't do that with just a prayer at the end of the service.
Oh, yeah.
We want them to know what they're getting into and say, this is what I want. And you're not going to get that if the first thing you're doing is judging.
Thank you so much for being here, brother. I really appreciate it. I really hope we stay in touch. I'm really excited about supporting you and your work, man. You are a blessing to talk to, man.
I appreciate
it. Same here, sir. If you can take a minute or so just to encourage the viewers and listeners the way you feel led to do, and also let them know where they can find you and your work. And after that, we'll close out. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I'll tell this. This is something that I keep coming back to, which is I spent 2 years in ministry dealing with the burdens and having a hard time with that. 2 years where I was afraid to make a change. And now, years later, from experience, I think what I have learned is having gone through things, I see that humans are resilient, that we overestimate what bad mistakes might do to us, how our future is going to change so bad and we can't recover, and we underestimate the resilience of our lives. So I made that choice years ago to say, hey, I'm going to leave the ministry and I'm going to join the FBI. I'm going to take a chance at this. And that ended up being such a positive adventure in my life. And so I took that adventure, that excitement, and I put it into a book that I've written. It's going to be published in the fall called Irreverent.
Oh, yes. Congratulations.
I got to sneak it in. It's called Irreverent: From Saving Souls to Chasing Sinners in the FBI. So it's a story about it's a story about like what would happen if you just take a Baptist pastor who's never handled a gun before and you stuck him in the FBI, and let's watch and see what happens there.
I didn't forget. I would hold it for a different show.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. I don't know if this is going to be appealing, but more details of the story you asked me are in there of the guy who liked to eat poo.
Yeah, it's more appealing to someone. But how can people find you, brother, and find your work, man?
Yeah, absolutely. They can find me on Instagram at _Eric_Robinson, or go to LinkedIn, search button, put in FBI with my name, and you'll see this face, and you'll know you got the right place.
Thank you again for being so transparent and sharing your life. And I'm excited to hear how much great work you did in our cities, and also now you're doing it in the communities when it comes to ministry, man. So thank you for being a part of the solution, man. Appreciate you so much. If you're watching, listening for the very first time, we're live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So this episode is there waiting for you. And of course, it'll be on listening platforms, hopefully very shortly. But thanks again for watching, listening, making us part of your week. Please follow and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TheyCallMeMrU. If, always forget this part, if you decide you want to financially support us, in the show notes where the episode is our Patreon link and our Buy Me a Coffee if you want to help support the massive amount of effort that it takes to carry 4 shows. If you want to help us out with that, thank you so much for doing that. But thanks again for making us part of your week. It's Eric Robinson. I'm Mr. U. We're out. Have a great day.